So welcome back to the Compassionate Capitalist podcast and video for those that are watching on YouTube today. Obviously the reason why we do this podcast, the whole purpose of compassionate capitalism is to create wealth through successful entrepreneur endeavors and be the investors that understand the risks associated with making an initial investment, but also anticipating the pathways to get to success and maintain success as a private company in the entrepreneur space. And one of the things that has really become a hot button, it's always been for a good bit of time, is security, with data security in particular and your intellectual assets within a company. But now, as we have seen sort of this future of work, where people are working more remote, they're working, through all different sorts of tools that they're using to access each other in video chats, to share documents, that there's all these other new potential cracks in what we would think of as the safety of when we're in our own offices getting access to the data that's on our computer or on a server someplace. And so when the aha moment kind of came through other particular podcasts that I had done with people talking about, investors talking about looking at future of work and what does that mean and how does that change. And of late, when we have seen these, because of the Internet of Things as something that we don't really think of as being points in on the to access to the data, but there's a huge opportunity out there for those nefarious people that want to hack our systems, get access to our private information, get access to corporate information, get access to account information, and more ways for them to penetrate what we think of as a secure data environment. So it became really important to have a conversation with somebody, a firm and an expert in this particular field, to help explain this, to what the problem is, for you to anticipate it, for you as an investor in a company, for you as a CEO of a company, but then also what can you do to anticipate it, to see if you're at risk, as well as to overcome it. And that is what our topic is today, the small business imperative, security in the cloud. And my guest today is Shamil Mendis of Evicio. Say hello, Shamil.
Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you.
And so Shamil Mendis is the VP of Sales and Marketing at Evicio, which is a business solution provider focused on security, automation, and staff augmentation. Shamil has decades of experience at the intersection of leadership, customer engagement, and business consulting. He's worked with clients at C-suite levels of Fortune 500 companies, small business, and government entities. Extensive experience in account management and building motivated teams, delivering research, business management, and technology solutions. Shamil has helped launch and advise startups in cutting-edge technologies, and that's one of the reasons why he understands the pain of what the small businesses and these CEOs in these early stage and high-growth companies might be experiencing with this massive shift in what we have in the way that we are conducting business these days. So Shamil is also the graduate of the University of Southern California, is a Gallup certified coach, and has a passion for traveling the world. Again, welcome, Shamil. How are you?
Thank you, Karen, for having me here. So excited to talk to you and to provide some great information. As you said, I have a background in market research, but a few years back decided to leave the whole corporate world, particularly for two reasons. Really saw two trends, right? We saw big data coming to the market in terms of companies being able to analyze big data. And then we also saw decentralization and automation really accelerating how companies are making decisions and transforming work, as you said, and how we play and how we interact. And so, decided to leave all of that and really help small businesses and startups launch their products and services and help them, to have a secure environment.
So were you seeing that trend prior to March or the first part of this year, where the decentralization and the points that you just made, were you seeing that start to happen? I mean, I know that there had been shifts of that, there goes waves, and then we kind of come back and we have waves of that. And the birth of these virtual working spaces were often because there was a decentralized, reps in different places. They didn't have to have offices and things like that, but it seemed like it kind of had tapered off.
Right.
And but that's just me, sort of in the layman's world, had you in the company seeing that happening? So you were already sort of skating to the puck, as they say, when, the necessity to it happened with the pandemic?
I would say that the remote work was a trend that was happening, specifically after the crash of 2008. You saw
Right.
people having this flexible ability and being furloughed sometimes and working from home. My teams were very flexible and we used to work 1 or 2 days a week from home, because it provided us to not only have that balance between work and life, but also the ability to think and not be distracted by all the chaos that goes on in a certain office, right? So those trends were really present. And my former company, actually, they've gone fully remote now. And you're seeing a lot more large Fortune 500 companies are using this hybrid model and been testing it out. And I think they're making big decisions to really go this remote route. And even schools, for that matter. I don't know if that's the best way for kids to learn, but they're also testing in terms of this hybrid model and having parents stay home. And so there is an interesting trend that's happening.
Yeah. So, well, we're going to get into that piece of it, because I remember when we were preparing for this, you had made a point
Yeah.
about all of these particular, and it goes to my comment about the Internet of Things, but all these potential points of entry that those that want to do harm can get into. But for our audience, let me just sort of set the stage on this, because sometimes it gets in a big, you'll see a big news release or a headline about it, but you don't, and that's when you get the big companies like the Equifaxes of the world, or, some big state government, or, I mean, here in Georgia, we still have one of our counties that I think is under a ransomware situation right now, that they were dealing with voter information getting hacked 2 years ago. So it's something that gets in there. But the Cyentia, I think that's how you say it, it's Cyentia Institute, did a study, and it came out in March of this year. They said over 60% of the Fortune 1000 companies had at least one public breach over the last decade, and 50% of the Fortune 250s. An exposure of 1,000 records, so they kind of estimate what the cost is on this, has a 6% chance of exceeding $10 million in their costs. And by comparison, a massive breach of 100 million records has a better than 50% chance of racking up at least 10 million in losses. And so that can really start to, and that's just in the recovery, the ill will, all the other things that happen without even being held hostage over it. And we have seen, which was being quite startling in some of the headlines in the middle of this pandemic, where hospitals are being held hostage with ransomware, where they shut down their entire operational systems, all of their equipment, all the stuff. They have to take these patients out of the hospital and move them someplace else because they got hacked, right? And they get hacked not only because of just your traditional ways of breaking in through a firewall, but through the Internet of Things, right? Everything is attached. And this is part of, that we don't think about, these devices where you speak to it in a room as being an open channel to the internet, but they are. And so that has been, one of these issues that now, to the point that, this is something that big companies, but they say small businesses don't necessarily experience it as much. But one of the things that we talked about before, Shamil, was that there's that you have seen a rise in this, because you now have these employees working from home, just going through a regular old dial-up. They might be using Google Apps to do their stuff that's hosted in a cloud that they have, or there might be a shared folder or something that they might be sharing, or they're got a Zoom thing going on, but at the same time, their kids are on computers because they're doing distance learning. They've got their spouses on stuff, and they do have a lot of homes have these devices that you can talk to in your house to get to ask a question to, right? And they're always listening. So in effect, they're always an open channel. Talk about how you've seen this sort of step up for that small business that may have 10 employees, or even like my husband's company that he works for, they might have 100 companies and remote people that are contractors. They're not necessarily employees that can have these kinds of things come up. And it's not even the actual dollar amounts like this. For a small business, it can be devastating because of the productivity kill that it happens when your system gets hit. So talk about what you're seeing happening there, and then sort of like the three common techniques, or what techniques that hackers would use to be able to penetrate this, and their motivations for that.
Yeah, definitely. And just to reiterate the point about small businesses, right? There is a common misconception that it's only large businesses that get hacked. And I think we've seen that even before COVID, small businesses do get hacked. And now after COVID, or within COVID, I guess we're still dealing with it, is that small businesses are getting attacked. IBM actually did a study recently that kind of gave it to the point of the small businesses. What is the impact? It's $7.8 million of impact if a small business gets attacked, right? So that's a huge number for small businesses, and to recover from that is going to be pretty tough. So when it comes to cyber attacks, so I want to kind of give an idea of why there's an uptick in cyber attacks, right? Not only for big businesses, but for small businesses. It's particularly because we're all working on the cloud. So if you think about it, our emails are on the cloud, our accounting software is on the cloud, HR management tools, databases, and in some cases, our intellectual property is also on the cloud, right? So I'm not saying being on the cloud is a negative thing. It has a lot of benefits in terms of scalability, automation, remote access. And in fact, at Evicio, we actually help clients migrate to the cloud. But I want to caution your listeners in saying that you have to have the correct security protocols implemented by a security expert, right? Our head of security always talks about the first line of defense you have is education, right? If you have a team of 10 people, 2 people, 3 people, or 100 people, you have to make sure all your contractors and employees have some type of security awareness training, right? Because that allows a baseline, and then continuously making sure to test these employees and staff members to see if they catch the suspicious behavior, right? So that's one thing that you can do. But let's talk a little bit about some of the common techniques hackers use, right? The first is phishing. The majority of hacks are done through phishing. So what is phishing? Phishing is basically hackers sending fake messages that appear to be trustworthy source. It might be a bank, it might be a Dropbox email that you usually use that people click on, and then you might download some malware, right? And what is malware? Malware is hidden programming code that will damage your data and provide access to your network, right? So this can happen by clicking on an email, or it can happen cruising through social media, and you click on a link, and a malware hacker is able to gain access through there. So phishing is one technique that hackers use.
Yeah. Let me just clarify that, or kind of, so like, for example, I hardly ever use Dropbox, right? But I have had 2 come to me, sent you this file, and Microsoft or Google then continues to remind me, even though I've rejected it and deleted it, 2-3 days later, it keeps reminding you haven't opened up your Dropbox. So Dropbox is sending out a note saying, oh, don't forget, you still have this thing pending. It's going to expire. You should do it. You right? And so the first time so one of my questions are, because you may, depending on your job, you might be getting files. Usually the first real clue on any of those kind of emails, or there used to be, oh, I saw you in this video, right? Oh, I'm in a video, right? And you click on it. If there's no other text on there, or this person didn't say, hey, how's it going? It's been a long time. Here's your video I saw, or I thought this was funny. You would enjoy it, like a regular note, then that odds are it's a thing. I always hover over it to see if it's the actual link, because it'll show up in the bottom of your screen what the real link is. And if it's not the real link, then clearly it's not. And then sometimes there's a lot of the companies like an AT&T or a bank or these kind of places will have a place to report that. So you can forward the email to that firm. So you should go to the actual corporate's website and see if they have a way to report spam and phishing.
Yep.
Second thing on the Dropbox. So I sent back to the, I forwarded to the guy's email and I said, were you sending this for me for a particular reason? You know, because it could have been a vendor. It was a kind of a name. It seemed like he goes, no, my account got hacked. Don't do anything with it. I was like, all right, delete, delete, delete. Right. But I didn't click on the link. I just forwarded him the note just to sort of see if it was legit. And so those are the kind of things that you would educate on a small business of their employees of best practices when they get something that's suspicious, and not just assume that it's bad or this or that or the other. Here's some steps that they could take to make sure that it's a valid email or a valid request.
Absolutely, and just checking, as you said, checking the email every time you open it, and making sure the URL that's on the email, on the body of the email, as well as the email address. If you hover over the email address and really take a look, is it coming from Evicio.com, or is it coming from XYZ.com, right? So making sure that matches up to who is actually emailing is very important when it comes to education. It's just stopping and looking at it. Now, if you're in a network, then you might not have to worry about that kind of stuff. But then even highly trained hackers are able to get through your network, right? But at a basic level, as a small business, having a private network is very important, because then all your emails are getting filtered through this filtration system.
So a private network is the VPN, so a virtual private network, and that works where people, when they log in to a separate, like they have their own password, they go to a website and log in, and then they get access to their company's resources as if they were in the office in a secure network.
Exactly. So you're basically replicating a physical office on the virtual network. And so what we do as an organization is to set those up for small businesses and medium-sized businesses in terms of putting the right firewalls based on the size of your company, based on the level of information you have within the company, and also providing access levels to particular individuals, right? Maybe everybody in the organization doesn't need to access every single thing, right? So permissioning those users and making sure there isn't people accessing information that's not necessarily necessary for their job, day-to-day job. And if they do need access, then we can request access on a case-by-case basis. So sectioning off and isolating those access levels also become critical.
Yeah. So within an environment, whether you're in an office and you're within your secure network, or even on logging in through a VPN, is there a risk when that employee or that person is using their own personal email on the same computer? They're checking Gmail, they got their VPN session and they're checking Gmail, and this kind of thing that we talked about, like the Dropbox thing or something like that comes up, or they're surfing, looking at articles on the social media, and they click on something is there a risk that they could be compromised with it, or is the risk outside of the office any greater than the risk inside the office in that same scenario, because they're introducing outside access into their computer?
Right. So when they're accessing website in the physical office, it's going through the internal network, right? So when they're accessing it through their personal computers, then it's going through their personal connection. So they might be in a home, or they might be in a coffee shop, and all of that information is getting routed through that particular router. So information is at risk. But if you are going through a VPN tunnel, you are less likely to have that risk level, right? So you want to make sure that at a minimum that organizations have that VPN connection.
Yeah. So the hackers haven't really been able to figure out how to like kind of sit and wait in that computer to then go into the VPN, because the VPN has a higher level of security associated with it. Okay. All right, good. So what about talk a little bit about ransomware and why that has become such a term that we hear these days.
Yeah. So ransomware is a type of malware, right? So it actually encrypts all your files and takes it hostage and makes it inaccessible unless you pay the ransom. So ransomware might start out with just your website, and then it kind of spreads like a virus to all your other parts of your organization. So those also will be taken hostage, and then you'll have to pay the ransomware. So we see, small mom and pops type of stores getting hit with ransomware, startups, schools, hospitals, and even government entities, for that matter, get hit with ransomware, and it's very hard to recover after that. So I bring this up is not to kind of scare your listeners, but to educate them. And at Evicio, we want to educate small businesses,
right,
them to ransomware, especially in this time of transition to remote work. Staff might not be aware of this type of thing. And so we actually have a free assessment on our website that your listeners can go and fill out and see, what is your level of security for your organization, right, on evicio.com. And you'll be able to really understand where are vulnerabilities, right?
Right.
And we can address them. Because if you don't know where your vulnerabilities are, there's no way that you're going to address them.
Yeah. And so just for those that are listening and may not, it's EVICIO, Edward, Victor, Indigo, Cat, Indigo, Oscar.com. And there you can get this assessment that you can do yourself. And then through that, and then I guess you guys do, like you'll do a free call or somebody will talk to them about that once they've completed the assessment to find out, their level of vulnerability.
Exactly. And in terms of vulnerability, if you have a security expert or a technologist on your team, it's important that they are updating their software, right? So we all hate to update our software on our cell phones. Similarly, for businesses, we have to make sure we're updating our software because the software producer is providing patches, right? And so that's one big reason how hackers are able to get in, because people aren't updating their software, so the patches aren't coming through. So one thing that you as a business owner and a startup is to make sure to update those software patches.
And those are I want to emphasize this. So this is in the, there's the problem, one of the solutions. Okay, so we got VPN, making sure you got a secure access. And the other solution is making sure all of your software is up to date. And sometimes if you don't have a dedicated IT person that's tracking, because sometimes they're out of sync with each other. One company, a Microsoft, might come up with an update, and then all the other little apps that use that haven't. And so you might have to wait a little bit or be selective in the way you do patches based on your own. But if you don't have that kind of in-house resource, those are the kind of services that you guys provide as well, right? That's our subtle infomercial here. But yeah, because and there's other, you're not unique in that, but there's other companies that are around, but the point of this is to understand that there's a company out there that works with small businesses, understands the pains that small business owners have, and can provide that as an as needed basis. So I also want to address in the updates of software, it's also when it comes to if you're doing websites based off of WordPress or off of some of these other tool sets. I had a huge problem a couple of years ago because I had blogs that were out there that were really inactive. They had a purpose at the at one point in time. It might have been a landing page. There was a certain topic that we had, and I just hadn't been updating them. They were just, out there. and they were just, but they were all housed on the server of, and most small businesses will have they won't have a dedicated hosting. They're in a share hosting model on their websites because the cost of when you go to a VPN, you would, but the cost of that, but you can upgrade with that. But so if you're one of those people, they came in through a back door of one of my non-updated WordPress sites, and basically locked down, or actually the web host caught it, and because they wanted to stop it, they hadn't done damage to my site yet, but they locked down my site. I couldn't get email. People couldn't submit stuff on it. It came up with an error code and it was horrible. And I had to go through and dig through and take all of that old data off, and decide it was easier just to kill a lot of these websites rather than go through the update of it. So it's really, really important. If you are a small business, if you're doing email marketing, you're doing internet marketing, you're doing campaigns where you're driving people through different types of sales landing pages, that you have somebody, and there's lots of services that will do this. Sometimes your hosting company will do it, that they maintain the updates to WordPress and whatever operating system you got your website on, but it's also with the plugins associated with that. And so I wanted to reinforce your point there, Shamil, because we think about it as just, Microsoft, and I hate updating my phone because it's like, oh, what apps are going to break? And, when it starts, and I, even to the point of like now, even like, and I thinking about it, like on my Prime Video, right? It's behaving funky. And they're like, oh, reset. I was like, oh, but then I got to download all the apps again. And it's like, sometimes it's just, bite the bullet now so you don't get harmed worse later. I don't know. I was trying to figure out a better way to do an analogy there, but so have you seen that with your clients where they think they got it all under control because they're doing regular old productivity and office apps, and then bang, through some side door that they didn't think about, that something like that will come in?
Yeah, so we've definitely seen that. And also, I want to mention one of the reasons is to stay vigilant, right? And to make sure your passwords are set up, right? So one of the things that we recommend to all of our clients is when you set up a device, or even personal, this should be for your home, like the IoT devices, they come up with default passwords, right? And they don't tend to be complex enough. And so we want to make sure that all your devices have complex passwords. Hackers are able to get into a password that's about 8 characters. Like if you have passwords that are 8 characters, it's very easy to hack that. So you want to put in passwords that are 15 or more characters, that have alphanumeric, have some kind of characters in there, capital letters, all those kinds of things, and make sure you're not recycling passwords. So it's very important to have a system in place, and this comes to education, where you're educated the importance of having secure passwords and not saving them on a document, which also
you mean I shouldn't have an Excel spreadsheet that's named passwords on it?
As long as the Excel spreadsheet also has another password, which is complex, and it has a multi-authentication factor involved as well. Which is another thing, which brings another thing, is having that multi-factor authentication login process. I don't know if I'm sure some of your listeners are familiar with it. Basically, when you go onto a website, you put in the password, and then you go to your cell phone, and you open an app and put in the actual code that comes up, and that code is rotating on a continuous basis. So that's a much safer way to secure your documents, secure your applications, websites, all those types of things.
Have they been able to hack fingerprint authorization yet?
Depends, I think. 24 Hour Fitness used to be my client back when I was in corporate, and they used to do the buyer scan to do the logging into the gym. And it was only scanning like a few points in your fingerprint. So there were some vulnerabilities there, but I think unless you're getting the full fingerprint, there's going to be risk involved.
Yeah,
But
because now they're linking it, the second authorization for some, instead of sending you the passcode on your phone, is your fingerprint. And so, you think it's really secure.
yeah, but they're also doing eyes too, scanning the eye,
Yeah.
tracking it that way as well.
Okay, so what haven't we covered when it comes to all of this? What other challenges or what other recommendations do you have for small business owners?
Yeah, so one of the things that small businesses really should have is, one is a network. And then once you have a network, once you're big enough, you're connecting all your devices, right? And the traffic is going through that network. We want to make sure that those devices are isolated, right? So if one device is having a particular security level and another device is having limited security level, and those devices are talking to each other, they need to be in a secure environment, and it needs to be monitored. One of the services that we provide is a 24/7 network monitoring service, just like your home alarm system. Somebody's monitoring live to make sure your network is safe and secure, right? So making sure your networks are isolated based on your security level is very important. The other thing I would say is, if you are a growing organization, you have a lot of intellectual property rights, a lot of data, specifically customer data, is to start thinking about cyber insurance, right? Cyber insurance is very critical when an attack happens. It can really devastate a small company, and it's very hard to recover, because if you get a ransomware, you got to pay $500,000 to get your data back, right? And then once you get it back, how do you make it put into secure environments? And then you have to hire security experts and engineers to do all of these things. So if you have the budget to do that, some cyber insurance might be also another technique that you can use.
That's a great, that's a great idea, because that totally makes sense. And then you have that insurance company is also validating that you're doing, because the risk assessment is going to validate that you've done the things that you need to do in order to prevent a hack and stuff like that. So, and then that's, and so for investors that are listening out there, as you are thinking about mitigating risk, what are the things that you mitigate risk when you're investing in a company or doing a follow-on investment? We have oftentimes talked about key man insurance. If something were to happen to a person that is critical to the success of that company, one of the founders or the inventor or something like that, that you have a way for the company to carry on while you seek to recover from that, from if something were to happen to that person. Well, sounds like cyber insurance is another one to put on a checklist, particularly if you are a software as a service company, that you are delivering your software and you aren't getting hacked and becoming a channel for some nefarious person to get into one of your customers' sites, right? Plus all of your own customer data, your billing data, all that other kind of stuff. That cyber insurance should be something that goes right on the checklist of what do you want your money being spent on when you invest in companies like this. You just can't take it for granted, because I tell you, as a small business person myself, every time I think that I can just get away with not doing it, then it ends up coming back and costing me way more time and money than if I had just done it to begin with. I remember when Equifax had that big hit.
Yeah.
And it cost them a bunch of money when they did that. And everybody, like all of us in the business world and the computer world, were like going, well, who was the CFO person that, was sharpening the pencil so much that they weren't going to pay for that software update? And they did some analysis of that, the fight between the CIO or the CTO and the CFO that says, we need this in our budget to be able to make sure that we're secure and we can't get hacked. And they're like, it ain't that big a deal. And then look at how much it costs them, right? And not only costs them significant in, real dollars for recovery, their reputational cost
Yep.
I think they got penalties from the government too, because they had all of this personal credit information was now exposed, to social security numbers, all this kind of stuff. It was huge for them on that. And so every penny, yeah, I bet you probably have a saying around there at Evicio. It's like what for every like the pound, a penny saved, pound foolish, or penny, something like that. So a penny saved on prevention.
It's better to be proactive than essentially proactive than reactive, right?
Yeah, come on, you're sales and marketing. You got to come up into a tagline that a penny saved, for whatever. Work
I,
on that. All right, Shamil.
I'll work on that. Be proactive, be vigilant, educate your staff, and make sure that everybody has the right resources to do their job better, right?
Yeah.
Essentially, we want to make sure that all your employees are safe and then the business is safe.
Yeah.
And that's what we do here at Evicio in terms of all of that. And the other thing I wanted to mention lastly here is the Yahoo attack, right?
Right.
Email addresses that were hacked, email accounts that were hacked, that went unnoticed for 3 years, right? So,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it went unnoticed for a long time. And so you might be hacked, your website might be hacked, and the functionality might be working now, but they might be extracting data.
Yeah. Well,
So,
I'm suspicious that Dropbox hasn't gotten hacked. That's why these all of a sudden too. I mean, because I'm not connected with these people. How would they have known my email? Somehow they hacked it, and they know, here's a Dropbox account and here's a Dropbox account, because I'm not in that guy's email address book, right? Yeah. The only source that we both would have would have been Dropbox.
Right, exactly. So stay vigilant out there.
But I don't know for sure, for anybody listening out here, I'm not saying that they actually got hacked. I'm just wondering.
Disclaimer.
No, I'm disclaiming, just a curiosity conversation among friends.
Right.
All right. So thank you very much for being on the show, Shamil. And please, everybody, go to evicio.com, evicio.com. Get your checklist. And please visit karenrands.co to learn about how we help entrepreneurs and investors create wealth through compassionate capitalism. And stay tuned. There's a little message afterwards. So thank you again, Shamil. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you, Karen. Take care, everybody.